Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I came home from a 10-hour shift to find a strange woman sipping my water in my own kitchen. No break-in, no damage, just a stolen key and a smug face. She said she was just checking for hazards. She didn't know I was a cop. She didn't know she'd just declared war. I'd just gotten off a 10-hour shift, the kind that makes your brain feel like wet sand and your spine beg for retirement. It was early afternoon, and the sun was doing its best to bake southern Nevada into one giant slab of toast. I turned onto the dirt road leading to my property, 3 acres of peace and gunpowder-scented solitude just south of Henderson. This place had become my sanctuary after 2 decades with LAPD and another 5 with the sheriff's office. Out here, it was just me, the creosote brush, a concrete shooting pad, and whatever godforsaken lizard hadn't baked alive by noon. As usual, I checked my perimeter cameras through the truck's display. One of them had a red flag, motion triggered by the front porch sensor just 20 minutes ago. My brows furrowed. I hadn't scheduled any deliveries. No students were on the calendar for today's firearms training either. The system pinged again. Interior movement in the kitchen. I cut the engine before it even rolled to a stop and stepped out into the heat. Heart already accelerating, but not from fear, just trained instinct. I drew my sidearm from the lockbox under the dash and approached the house silently, boots crunching gravel with just enough menace to announce this was a bad day to pick the wrong house. The front door wasn't damaged, no forced entry. Lock was fully intact. That's when I noticed the faint metallic glint near the threshold, a spare key. My spare key, or at least a copy of it. I eased the door open and moved into the entryway, smooth and quiet. No need to shout warnings. This wasn't the suburbs. Whoever was inside had already crossed a line. I could hear the soft click of a refrigerator door. My kitchen was being raided, and then I saw her, standing there like she belonged, holding one of my bottles of electrolyte water with all the casual entitlement of someone checking into a hotel spa. Woman in her mid-50s, styled to the hilt in a pastel polo shirt and tennis skirt, white visor perched above frosted blonde bangs. She froze when she saw me, mid-sip, and had the gall to look surprised. "Oh, my goodness," she gasped, hastily setting the bottle down. "I thought this was Becky's house." I didn't say a word, just closed the door behind me and locked it. She blinked. I was told this house was vacant. There must be a mix-up. I stepped forward slowly, not threatening, but very much done playing pretend. "Put your hands where I can see them." Her mouth opened again, but I cut her off with a badge flick. "Tyler McCain, Clark County Sheriff's Department. You're in my house, ma'am, without consent. You need to stay exactly where you are." The look on her face told me she'd expected just about any outcome except this one. She lifted her hands slowly, palms out, but tried to salvage the moment with a nervous laugh. "I'm Karen Sloan, president of the Cactus Ridge Homeowners Association," she said, like that was supposed to carry more weight than a felony. "I think someone from the board told me this property was abandoned. I was just checking for hazards." I pulled out my phone, thumbed through the live feed, and showed her the recording of her entering with a key, one not issued by me. "This you, walking in." Her face paled. That's not what it looks like." "It looks like unlawful entry," I said flatly, "and maybe possession of a copied key without consent. That's a lot of explaining to do. So here's what we're going to do." I called it in while she stood there twitching like a chihuahua during fireworks. The responding deputies arrived in just under 15 minutes. I let them in and provided my statement while Karen made the rounds, from excuses to outrage, and then back to tears. The bottle of water was still on the counter like a trophy. She tried to talk her way out of the cuffs. "It was a misunderstanding," she insisted, her voice tight as they guided her to the patrol SUV. "I was only trying to help the community. I thought someone could have been hurt or—" "You were checking my fridge for injuries?" I asked, standing on the porch as she was loaded in. No answer. They drove off, tires crunching over the gravel, her protests muffled through the closed windows. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't satisfied. It's just that I knew people like her. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I barely slept that night. Not from nerves. Those were trained out of me years ago, but from the low, persistent hum of instinct. The kind of tension that lives in your bones when something doesn't add up. It wasn't just the break-in, it was her. The way she walked in like she owned the place. The instant rationalization. The name she dropped like a badge. Karen Sloan, president of the Cactus Ridge HOA. And the key. That damn key. I sat in my home office around 4 in the morning, lights low, going through old footage. A year ago, I'd let a few people from the neighborhood tour the place during an open-range demonstration, mostly retirees curious about my firearms training. I found the video. There she was. Same pastel visor, same look of polished suburban menace, lingering in the kitchen while I answered questions outside. At one point, she picked up my keys from the counter, examined them briefly, then set them back down and smiled at the camera like it was a friend. She lifted the damn print. I leaned back, jaw tightening. She'd used that moment to get a copy made. A year later, she'd walked right in like it was her scheduled appointment. This wasn't about confusion. This was control, entitlement with a clipboard, and I had no doubt she thought she'd get away with it. By noon, the storm hit. Not weather. Propaganda. It started with a knock at my gate. I checked the monitor. No one I recognized. 3 people in Cactus Ridge polo shirts standing next to a Subaru packed with what looked like yard inspection equipment. Clipboards, vests, a long metal pole I hoped wasn't a probing device. One of them spoke into the call box. "We're with the HOA Inspection Committee, here to assess reports of chemical odor and possible environmental violations." I almost laughed. Almost. I keyed the mic. "Wrong house. Wrong jurisdiction. This property's not part of your HOA. Step off." The woman with the clipboard leaned in. "Sir, we're acting on a formal complaint. If you don't comply, the association may escalate to county enforcement." "The association can escalate itself into a cactus," I replied, and terminated the call. They stayed at the gate for another 5 minutes, scribbling on forms and taking pictures. I filmed them back through every angle I had. Front gate, road, even a drone camera I'd set up months ago for aerial recon training. Just in case. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for supplies. At the gas station bulletin board, I saw the first flyer. "Clark County resident under investigation for hazardous activity. Neighbors report illegal weapons and suspicious odors. Be vigilant. Protect our community." There was no name. Just a blurry image of my front gate and the Cactus Ridge logo stamped at the bottom. I tore the flyer down, scanned it with my phone, and checked the gas station security cam to confirm who posted it. No surprise. It was Karen, released on bail, wearing a new tennis hat and sunglasses, face partially obscured but clearly her. When I got home, another copy was tucked under my windshield wiper and 3 more on the road sign half a mile down. It wasn't just defamation, it was a coordinated smear campaign. HOA-style psychological warfare. She wanted to paint me as the unstable neighbor with guns and something to hide. Problem for her, I have nothing to hide. And I do my best work when people try to frame me. The next morning, my department liaison called me in. Someone had submitted an anonymous letter to Internal Affairs claiming I brandished a weapon at an unarmed woman and maintained unauthorized explosive chemicals on site. I met it head-on. Provided full footage, timestamps, and open access to every inch of my property. Within 3 hours, the IA sergeant cleared me. He left shaking his head. "These HOA folks are nuts." "That's the polite word," I replied. That evening, a second team from the so-called HOA Environmental Commission arrived, this time trying to bypass the gate through the side access road. They claimed they were allowed to observe from public easement lines. I hit them with a floodlight, called the sheriff's office, and had the responding deputy issue them trespass warnings. One of the men argued with the deputy, insisting they had statutory authority under HOA Bylaw Section 14 Alpha. The deputy looked at him and said, "Buddy, you're lucky you're not in cuffs." As they left, I noticed one of them toss something out of the passenger window. I recovered it. Another flyer, same design, only this one had my full name on it. It wasn't subtle anymore. They were escalating. She was escalating. Good. So was I. I spent the next morning exactly how any sane man would spend it, with 3 cups of black coffee and a deep dive into Nevada property law, HOA bylaws, and the county assessor's office complaint process. Not because I had doubts about my rights, but because I knew the kind of war Karen Sloan was waging wasn't fought with facts. It was fought with nuisance, attrition, and enough bureaucratic harassment to choke a judge. So I stopped playing defense. First step, I drove straight to the county recorder's office in downtown Henderson. 15 minutes, 2 signatures, and 1 flash of my badge later, I had notarized copies of everything that mattered: deed, parcel history, zoning exception, and formal non-association status with Cactus Ridge HOA. The cherry on top, A document signed by the original landowner in the 70s explicitly declining incorporation into the HOA when the community was formed. Let them try to argue with that. Second step, evidence. I reviewed the footage from the day Karen entered my house. There it was, clear as crystal, her using a silver key she pulled from her purse. Not a bobby pin, not a shim, not even a generic lockpick. A key, made for my door, and in high definition too. I took stills, then layered them with a comparison photo from the day she'd visited during the open range tour a year ago. In that footage, she stood in my kitchen, smiling while holding my keys, chatting with a neighbor about how orderly my layout was. At one point, she rested the keys on her palm and rubbed her thumb across the fob. Innocent at the time. Now it looked a hell of a lot like she lifted an imprint. I packaged the stills, footage, and annotations on a secure drive, created a chain of custody form, and called in a favor with a buddy in the DA's office. He wasn't thrilled to get a surprise on a Friday morning, but when I showed him the tape, his eyebrows rose and his tone changed. You're saying she made a copy of your key and used it a year later to enter the house? Without consent. Claimed someone from the board let her in. She's the board. Exactly. He exhaled. Okay, let me pass this up the chain. I knew better than to expect immediate action. Bureaucracy has a pace, and it sure as hell isn't mine. But that was fine, because while they moved slow, I didn't. That weekend, I made house calls. Started with Paul and Helen, elderly couple 2 streets over. Good folks. They'd been in Cactus Ridge for 20 years and had the haunted look of people who'd spent the last 5 trying to appease a tyrant with a newsletter. When I asked them if Karen had ever entered their home, Helen stiffened. She said there were noise complaints, she muttered. Said someone reported our carbon monoxide alarm going off while we were at Helen's sister's. When we got home, the back door was ajar. Nothing stolen, just moved. Paul looked me straight in the eye. I never reported it. I didn't want trouble. Next stop. A divorced father named Rick who'd left the HOA entirely and rented a place just past the outer boundary. He didn't even wait for me to finish my question. She went through my mail, he said. Said she was checking for identity theft patterns after I forgot to forward for a week. You believe that? I did. More than I wanted to. By Monday, I had 4 informal witness statements, 2 copies of neighbor complaints, and confirmation from the locksmith who serviced my house that my front lock had very likely been copied due to the clean engagement and unusual wear pattern. He wrote it up as a formal report. Then came the smoking gun. A 5th neighbor, someone I barely knew named Vicky, a nurse who worked nights, reached out through my burner number I'd been circulating. She asked to meet at a nearby coffee shop off the record. She brought her phone. On it was a video from her Ring doorbell cam. 2 weeks ago, nighttime, Karen Sloan standing on her porch talking to a woman I didn't recognize. Clear audio. She always leaves by 6, Karen was saying. That's the best time to do your routine inspections. I have keys for 3 of them. She smiled, shook a manila envelope, and added, no need to spook anyone. It's all for their safety. Vicky didn't know who the woman was, but I sure as hell knew what that envelope meant. I asked for a copy. She handed it over without hesitation. Later that night, I updated the DA's folder with the new evidence and filed an official request for a search warrant for the HOA office. I cited probable cause of illegal possession of resident keys, unlawful entry, potential data privacy violations, and direct retaliation against law enforcement personnel. By the end of the day, the request was in the judge's hands, and Karen had no idea the noose was tightening. The warrant came through on a Wednesday morning, just before noon. Judge Garza had reviewed everything, my footage, the locksmith's report, neighbor statements, and that lovely little video of Karen bragging about her routine inspections. Her signature was scrawled at the bottom of the document like a green light on a loaded weapon. It was time to go fishing in the dark closet of Cactus Ridge. I coordinated with the county sheriff's office and brought in 2 deputies from a neighboring district, neutral guys, no ties to local politics or HOA favoritism. They arrived in unmarked vehicles and plain clothes. I wasn't interested in putting on a show. I was interested in results. Karen wasn't at the office when we arrived. Good. That spared us the immediate screeching. The HOA office was housed in a prefab trailer tucked behind the community center, painted beige with a fake stucco finish and an aggressively smug little plaque out front. Cactus Ridge Administrative Hub, enhancing community living. I was tempted to shoot the sign on principle. The assistant was there, a pale, twitchy guy in his 30s named Corey, who looked like he'd lost a slap fight with a stapler. When he saw the warrant, his entire demeanor wilted. "You can't just," he began. I held up the document. "We can, and we will." Inside, the place looked like a storage unit pretending to be City Hall. Filing cabinets, folders stacked like pancakes, whiteboards covered in hand-drawn calendars, and block letter phrases like pool key permission renewal and pet compliance watch list. One cabinet was labeled simply surveillance. We started with that. Deputy Moreno popped the lock, and I pulled open the top drawer. Inside were 7 envelopes, each labeled with handwritten names and lot numbers. 3 of them contained house keys, including one labeled with my address. Each was accompanied by a printed schedule detailing the homeowner's usual comings and goings, times they left for work, when they returned, whether they had alarm systems, pets, cameras. It wasn't just creepy, it was operational. Like she was planning raids, not routine checks. Further down, we found a binder full of printed emails, dozens of them. Most were between Karen and board members, but a disturbing number were drafts addressed to county departments, police divisions, and local businesses. Nearly all of them were about residents being non-compliant, mentally unstable, or a threat to collective safety. She had filed no less than 6 complaints about me alone, all using variations of the Anonymous Whistleblower Act. Corey was sweating through his shirt now. I told him to take a seat and stay there. Then came the file labeled Special Enforcement. Inside, a spreadsheet with more than 30 resident names and a rating system, color-coded. Red for repeat violators, yellow for possible threats, green for observed compliant. I was red. Paul and Helen, red. Even that nurse Vicky was red. Alongside the spreadsheet were physical copies of flyers, nearly identical to the ones that had been posted around town, complete with pre-marked distribution maps. She'd organized entire routes for her volunteers to post slanderous materials. She thought she was running Homeland Security, Deputy Blanchard muttered. Then I opened the desk drawer, and there they were. 3 sealed letters addressed to Clark County Sheriff's Office, Department of Public Safety, Office of the District Attorney. Each envelope contained a typed, unsigned letter with a subject line, Urgent Concern, Officer Tyler McCain, may be. Storing illegal ammunition and narcotics. They were postmarked for next week. She was planning to escalate even further. I had to take a breath. Even for Karen, this was beyond entitled. This was clinical and dangerously close to federal territory. False reports to law enforcement, privacy violations, misuse of identification. We cataloged everything, sealed it under evidence protocol, and filed the full discovery with the district prosecutor. I personally delivered it, along with a summary of what we'd recovered, and filed my sworn statement. The DA looked up after reading the schedule of her planned distributions. "This looks coordinated, not just rogue behavior, organized activity under color of HOA authority." I nodded. "She's got her hands in everything. And she's not done." He leaned back. "She is now." A warrant for Karen Sloan's second arrest was signed before sunset. The next morning, we picked her up. She was stepping out of her SUV in a designer windbreaker, holding an overpriced coffee and speaking to someone on Bluetooth when we pulled into her driveway. She didn't even see me until I stepped into her path. "Karen Sloan," I said, loud and clear. "You are under arrest for unlawful entry, illegal possession of residential keys, falsification of reports, and criminal defamation of a law enforcement officer. You have the right to remain silent." "You can't be serious," she shrieked. "I'm the president of the HOA, and I'm the guy whose house you broke into," I said, as the cuffs clicked shut behind her. She thrashed all the way to the squad car. I didn't even blink. The fallout started faster than I expected. By the time Karen was booked into county jail, word had already begun to spread across Cactus Ridge. For a community that had treated her like royalty, the sudden silence was telling. No lawn committee meeting, no sunset cleanliness drive, no clipboard patrols, just tightly closed blinds and trash bins dragged out a day early, like people were preparing for an HOA apocalypse. I wasn't celebrating yet. I knew better. After the arrest, I returned home to process everything. My inbox was a war zone. 4 media inquiries, 2 subpoenas, and a message from the sheriff himself asking for a private briefing. I spent the next 8 hours organizing files, copying drives, and writing formal reports. By the time I was done, I had enough documentation to build a damn museum exhibit titled How Not to Run an HOA. But things didn't slow down. They got weirder. At sunrise the next day, I found a letter shoved into my fence slats, no postage. It was typed, unsigned, and unhinged. Congratulations, Officer McCain. You've burned the bridge that kept this neighborhood clean, safe, and civilized. You've emboldened criminals and outsiders. When chaos returns, and it will, you'll only have yourself to blame. We will remember who let it in. They didn't even try to hide the implication. A threat, wrapped in passive-aggressive wrapping paper. I forwarded it to the DA's office, then pinged my external camera network. Footage showed a man in a hoodie and latex gloves dropping the letter around 3:30 in the morning. License plate was covered. I ran facial rec. Nothing. The pressure was still on. Later that week, I got a knock at the gate. 2 men and 1 woman stood just outside the property line, holding matching briefcases. Their shirts read, Cactus Ridge Transitional Oversight Committee. What fresh hell was this? I answered through the gate intercom, keeping my voice calm. What do you want? The lead man, tall with the rigid posture of a failed military cadet, stepped forward. We're here on behalf of the interim HOA board. We'd like access to assess potential code violations resulting from resident complaints, specifically relating to noise from the firing range, visible storage of ammunition, and structural non-conformance of your garage roof. I couldn't help but laugh. I'm not under your HOA. Never have been. We've received multiple reports. Under subsection 22 of the Cactus Ridge Amendment Charter, external impact sites adjacent to the community may fall under auxiliary assessment jurisdiction. Nice try, I replied. That clause was struck down in county court 8 years ago during the Jameson appeal. You're citing a dead bylaw. Now get off my gate before I call in a trespass report and file harassment charges. They conferred for a moment, visibly surprised I'd shut them down that hard. Then the woman leaned in toward the camera. You're making enemies in places that matter, Officer McCain. Not the first time, I said flatly, and ended the call. By nightfall, I'd had enough. I contacted my lawyer, a bulldog named Tasha Morales, who specialized in civil liability and malicious interference cases. We laid everything out. The break-in, the false reports, the flyers, the forged authority visits, the anonymous letter, even the HOA's attempt to reassert influence through a transitional committee. Tasha didn't blink once. We're suing, she said. Karen, and the HOA, separately, one for criminal and civil damages, the other for organizational negligence and conspiracy to defame. I filed the civil suit the next day. The damages included emotional distress and defamation, false allegations leading to internal affairs review, unlawful use of a copied key, trespassing and surveillance without consent, reputational harm as an officer. Tasha requested $180,000 in total compensation plus legal fees, with the demand letter citing federal privacy statutes and Nevada criminal code violations. Within 48 hours, we received a response. It wasn't a denial. It was a counter-threat from the HOA's legal counsel suggesting that if we proceeded, they would release materials to the press showing patterns of instability and disproportionate response from the plaintiff. Tasha smirked. Good. That's attempted character assassination. We'll triple it. The real kicker came 2 days later when we learned Karen had been reaching out from jail, calling former board members, trying to coordinate damage control. All of it recorded. All of it discoverable. They were flailing. And it was time to press harder. They say the real storm comes after the silence. In this case, the silence lasted all of 2 days. Then came the subpoenas. Apparently, HOA's new legal advisor, some desperate firm they dug up from Vegas outskirts, decided to launch a counteroffensive. They filed a motion claiming I'd violated their constitutional right to conduct inspections under neighborhood-wide health concerns, and that I had used my badge to intimidate and suppress community functions. Cute. Even cuter. One of their exhibits was a still frame of me standing in front of my own gate with my badge out, from my own security footage. They tried to flip my own camera feed into evidence of abuse. Tasha was almost disappointed. This is weak. They're trying to exhaust you with filings. She filed a protective order the same day, requesting the court to bar HOA from any further non-criminal communication or in-person contact with me or my property. The judge granted it provisionally. But HOA wasn't done embarrassing themselves. The next evening, just after dusk, I caught movement on the back part of my land, south fence near the wash. I checked the monitors. Thermal sensors picked up 3 bodies moving low and slow, clearly avoiding lights. I locked the house down and grabbed my flashlight, body cam, and sidearm. I didn't need backup. I was the backup. By the time I made it to the tree line, 2 figures had already climbed the perimeter fence. Idiots. And were crawling through my brush like wannabe rangers. The third stayed back, holding something. A map? Clipboard? "Don't move," I called. Hands visible right now. They froze. Slowly they stood. One dropped the clipboard. It had an HOA logo on the front. "Step forward," I ordered. "Now." Turns out they were volunteers. Cactus Ridge residents tasked by Karen's loyalists to document potential runoff and unpermitted construction on my land. They were trespassing on my posted, gated, locked property. I cuffed all 3 and had them sit on the dirt while I called in patrol. 2 uniforms arrived, took my statement, reviewed my footage, and called the on-duty sergeant. Within 20 minutes, all 3 were loaded into cruisers and charged with criminal trespass. One of them, a smug 50-something guy with wraparound sunglasses, kept saying, "We're allowed. This is communal concern," until the deputy finally told him to shut up or get hit with obstruction. Back at the house, I reviewed the clipboard they dropped. It had satellite images, annotations of where water might pool, even quotes from an environmental law blog. Someone was building a case, a fake one, about my shooting range or septic system harming desert biodiversity. And all of it was junk. Tasha laughed when I showed her. They're grasping at tumbleweeds. But it's enough to expand our claim. Now we add coordinated surveillance and attempted entrapment. The next morning, I made a decision. No more passive defense. I spent the day compiling a comprehensive report. Every interaction, every letter, every video, every police file. I wasn't just responding anymore. I was going to bury this HOA. They didn't come back the next night, but someone else did. At exactly 4:12 a.m., my driveway camera tripped. A single vehicle, black Chevy Suburban, pulled up near my mailbox, killed its lights, and sat idle for 2 minutes. Then the driver stepped out, walked up to the fence gate, and tossed something over. The infrared caught the shape, small, metallic. By the time I got outside, the SUV was gone. But what landed in my gravel driveway wasn't trash. It was a USB flash drive sealed inside a Ziploc bag with a typed note. "They don't know I made copies. You need to see this. Trust me." It felt too dramatic to be real, but I knew better than to ignore anonymous tips. I scanned the drive first on an isolated laptop offline. No malware, just video files, 7 of them. Every clip was from inside the HOA office. Footage from Karen's personal meetings, security cams that clearly were not legally disclosed to residents, and, most damning, a recording from 2 months back. Karen, in her office, speaking directly to 2 board members. "I don't care if he's a cop. If we let people like that settle here, we lose control. His gun range? A liability. His attitude? Problematic. This community has standards, and if he won't comply voluntarily, we'll find leverage." Another clip, date stamped a week before the break-in, shows Karen handling my house key. She holds it up, smiles, and says, "He won't even know." Just long enough to verify. If he's got chemicals, that's our window. It was enough. I forwarded the videos to Tasha, then drove straight to the sheriff's office and handed the originals over to Internal Affairs. Not because I was under review, but because I wanted this on record with full transparency. Every word, every frame. Tasha moved fast. Within 48 hours, a new search warrant was authorized. This time federal, since HOA had breached multiple privacy laws and crossed into possible RICO territory by conspiring to entrap, surveil, and fabricate claims for coercion. The feds showed up with a box truck and 2 agents from the Nevada Cybercrime Task Force. HOA headquarters, a bland stucco building with a fake stone fountain, didn't look like the kind of place that held secrets. But behind locked cabinets, they found multiple key blanks and molds, schedules of homeowner travel plans, a labeled map of the entire neighborhood with red marks on specific houses, including mine, a file labeled McCain Leverage Options. That one included printouts of my LinkedIn, old news articles from my LA, PD days, and even a photo of my sister's front porch, taken without her knowledge in a different county. The moment they found that, Karen, out on bail from her first arrest, was hit with new federal charges: conspiracy, stalking, identity misuse, Illegal surveillance. They cuffed her right in her living room. This time, she didn't scream. She just whispered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Too late. The arrest of Karen Sloan hit the local headlines within hours. The headline on Channel 13 read, "HOA President Arrested Again. Alleged Surveillance Ring Exposed in Henderson Subdivision." By noon, my inbox was flooded again. Reporters, lawyers, a podcast host from San Diego asking if I'd give a deep dive interview on the psychology of suburban authoritarianism. I ignored most of it. My focus was on the case. That afternoon, I met with Tasha at her office in Las Vegas. The energy had shifted. This wasn't just a civil matter anymore. We were now working parallel to federal prosecutors, and the scope had widened. "They're building something big," she said, scrolling through the warrant returns. "Karen's HOA presidency was just the front. You were the threat because you knew your rights, and they couldn't intimidate you like the others." That's when she dropped the real bomb. They found a burner phone, messages to someone listed as K, coordinating the key duplication and the complaint letters. But they traced the number. It belongs to a city code enforcement officer. My blood ran cold. They had a mole inside the county. Apparently, Karen had been feeding false complaints to a specific city official, who then submitted anonymous environmental violations to give HOA reason to harass certain property owners, including me. It explained the sudden inspection attempt, the water runoff claims, the suspicious timing of complaints filed with 0 signatures. I contacted the sheriff personally. He pulled in a liaison from the state attorney general's office. Within hours, a joint task force was formed. I wasn't the only target. 2 other homeowners had similar complaints dismissed quietly in the past year, likely to avoid bad press. Now, those files were reopened. The same evening, a judge issued a temporary freeze on all HOA activity, pending investigation. That meant no more board meetings, no more enforcement actions, no more financial transactions. Cactus Ridge was in administrative lockdown. But that wasn't the end. At 3 in the morning, my driveway sensor tripped again. This time, it wasn't a Suburban, it was a sedan. Engine running, windows down. Someone shouted something, then sped off. When I checked the fence, I found a severed coyote tail nailed to the gatepost with a note stapled beneath it. "This is how we deal with predators around here." They were getting desperate and feral. I took photos, called patrol, and handed the note to evidence. I also pulled the footage and sent it straight to the AG's task force. This wasn't just harassment now. It was a threat with clear intent to intimidate a witness. Tasha added it to the amended complaint and filed a motion to expedite trial discovery. With the freeze in place and new arrests likely, the walls were closing in on the rest of the HOA board. I stood on my porch, watching the flashing patrol lights reflect off the fence. They thought fear would work, that I'd back down. They forgot I'd dealt with worse than HOA thugs in the middle of the night. And I was just getting started. By the time the federal charges against Karen Sloan were formally read in court, her attorney looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 days. The hearing lasted less than 15 minutes. She was denied bail this time. Flight risk, multiple offenses, tampering with witnesses. I attended the arraignment in plain clothes. She didn't even look at me. But the damage she caused still echoed. That same afternoon, I got a call from an HOA board member, not one of Karen's inner circle. This guy, Brad Torres, had always seemed more like a nervous follower than a fanatic. He asked if I'd meet him at a diner off the highway. I agreed, but I didn't go alone. Tasha sent a paralegal with me and wired me with a recorder. Brad arrived shaking. "I didn't know she was doing half this stuff," he said, eyes darting toward every truck that passed outside. "But I signed the funding authorizations. I thought they were for landscaping or legal fees." He slid over a folder, printouts of internal HOA emails. Karen had used HOA dues to pay for locksmith work, video surveillance equipment, and private investigator consultations. She even filed reimbursements labeled drainage audit expenses that were, in fact, payments to a now disbarred ex-cop she'd hired to follow me. The emails also revealed that at least 2 other board members knew and even encouraged the assertive compliance program, which apparently included unannounced visits, drone flyovers, and what they called temporary access operations. I handed the folder over to Tasha the same evening. She reviewed it and nearly laughed. They called illegal break-ins access operations. Who writes this crap? Marvel villains. She immediately filed an expanded civil suit naming the entire HOA board for invasion of privacy, malicious prosecution, emotional distress, civil rights violations under Nevada law, defamation of character, retaliatory harassment against a public official, and this time the damages weren't just symbolic. Tasha proposed a total of $1.2 million in compensatory and punitive damages, plus permanent injunctive relief, ensuring Cactus Ridge HOA could no longer operate under its current charter. That got attention. Within 3 days, 5 other homeowners came forward with their own accounts, unauthorized compliance inspections, doors left ajar, trash moved around, backyard photos appearing in anonymous violation letters. One even had a story where Karen had confronted his teenage daughter over improper outdoor attire. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me. It was a pattern, a system. I sat on my porch one night, rereading the amended complaint draft, when I noticed something satisfying. Every paragraph began not with a question, but with a statement of fact. No more allegedly. No more may have. Just the truth, stacked like bricks. And it was all going public. The court set a trial date for civil proceedings, and the county opened a public oversight review of HOA operations across Henderson. I slept easy that night, not because it was over, but because they finally understood who they'd messed with. They called the courtroom packed, but that was an understatement. On the morning of the trial, the courthouse lobby buzzed like a beehive. Local reporters, a few national outlets, and at least a dozen residents from the Cactus Ridge community, some in support, some just there to watch the flames. Tasha met me in the hallway, dressed sharp as a blade, with a trial binder that looked heavy enough to stop a bullet. Karen Sloan entered in handcuffs. The judge, a sharp old Navy vet named Holbrook, wasted no time. Opening statements were swift, clear, and merciless. Tasha laid it out. This wasn't just about trespass or slander. It was a coordinated campaign of harassment, manipulation, and illegal surveillance, fueled by a woman obsessed with power and a board that either looked away or eagerly helped. Karen's attorney tried to frame her as a well-meaning overachiever. Her only crime, he said, was caring too much about her community. Tasha's response was simple. She didn't care about her neighbors. She wanted to own them. Over the next 5 days, we laid it all out. Video of Karen using the key, emails showing access operations and funds misuse, testimony from residents detailing fear, intimidation, even withdrawal from community life. The severed coyote tail incident, now tied to a hired intimidator linked to Karen's contact list. Forensic proof of the spyware drone footage and duplicated garage remotes. Every line of defense crumbled. Karen cracked on day 4. On the stand, under pressure, she admitted she had stepped over some lines, but claimed she believed she was acting under community authority. The judge didn't buy it. By the end of closing arguments, the tension was thick enough to chew. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. Verdict: Karen, guilty on all counts, liable for trespass, harassment, defamation, illegal surveillance, and retaliatory abuse of authority. The HOA, dissolved by judicial order. The board, collectively fined, barred from serving on any HOA or municipal position for 10 years. Damages awarded to me, $280,000, plus legal costs, plus full civil restraining order against Karen and any former board members. But that wasn't the most satisfying part. A month later, Karen's house was listed at auction, seized to help cover the damages. I didn't even blink before putting in a cash offer. No negotiation. I bought it. People expected me to sell it off or tear it down. I didn't. I turned it into something better. The front got a new security fence, cameras, and a fresh coat of tan paint. The inside, I converted it into a training facility, a personal defense and home security course site. Local residents now came to learn from me how to protect their homes. From burglars, yes, but also from HOA tyrants like Karen. There's a plaque out front now near the old mailbox. Never again. Property is not permission. Every now and then, I still get curious looks from new residents in town. Is that the house? They ask, and I just nod. Because the only thing more satisfying than winning is making sure they remember exactly why you did